All right, welcome everyone. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the second listening session hosted by the Native American Agriculture Fund in partnership with the Native Farm Bill Coalition and their research partner, the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative at IFAI at the University of Arkansas. The purpose of this listening session is to gather as much input as possible for a report that will inform the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health on food and nutrition disparities in Indian country. So your feedback and comments are vital to help Indian country get our voices heard. More than 50 years ago, the country's food policy agenda was influenced by the first and only White House Conference on Food, Nutrition, and Health. And today, our tribal communities are among those who have the highest rates of hunger, as well as health-related issues such as heart disease or diabetes. We all know that those statistics exist, and we all have those pockets of our communities that are doing grassroots work to combat those problems. But for us to continue that progress, we need to do our best to come together and present a collective voice. I'd like to introduce today's panel as we go through. We're just going to do brief introductions. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tony first.
Hello, my name is Water Runs Downhill. My English name is Tony Stanger McLaughlin, and I am the CEO of the Native American Agriculture Fund. And we want to thank everyone, our partners included, for coming together to create the unified voice. We want to make sure that moving forward, the White House and all interested bodies, including the public and private sector, know the needs of Indian country and understand the importance of having our voice, and in particular, our voice at the forefront of creating change and initiating positive impacts in Indian country related to food and nutrition.
Great, thank you, Tony. I guess we'll turn it over to Maribel at IFAI.
Bonjour, everyone. Miigwech, Mary Belzuk, Nadesh Nakas. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Mary Belzuk, and I'm over communications at the Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative. We are partners in the Native Farm Bill Coalition. We help out with research and policy. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly from our team, and she can introduce herself.
Chokma, hello everyone. My name is Kelly Case. I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and I serve as staff attorney for the Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative. So I'll be one of your nerds on call today as we move through this process and get to hear your comments.
Hi, I'm John Vampel with IFAI. I'm a former Director of Government Affairs for the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, Oklahoma, Director of Policy and Governance now for IFAI. I believe I'll pass this off. Kayla, I'll pass this off to you next.
Great, thanks, John. Kayla Gaybeck Carroll. I am a member of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians in northern Minnesota. I'm an attorney at Holland and Knight, and I have the privilege of working for another great Minnesota tribe, the Shakopee, Minot, and Wahkinsett Sioux community, who has been a critical partner in establishing the Native Farm Bill Coalition back in 2017. So happy to be here with you all today. Thanks.
Abby, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, everyone. My name is Abby Roweeder. I am a descendant of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe in northwestern Minnesota, and I am the policy assistant at the Intertribal Agriculture Council, also a member of the Native Farm Bill Coalition.
Great, thank you all so much. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our listening session. The comments are open to you, and we love for your input, feedback, questions as we go through. We'll kind of have some prompting questions throughout to maybe spark some ideas, spark opportunities to submit comments, but just an overview of what we're expecting. We hope that participants, be they tribal members, producers, elected officials, we will hopefully provide relevant and necessary feedback from questions asked in this listening session about their thoughts, wants, and needs in your communities or throughout Indian country as a whole, as they're related to hunger, nutrition, and health. A little bit more background about what the report is and what we're gathering input and comments on. So as a part of the Native Farm Bill Coalition and NAAF and IFAI and Intertribal Agriculture Council, we'll be compiling these comments into a report because the Biden and Harris administration is hosting listening sessions in different regions across the country. And due to the high demand for participation and limited capacity in those White House listening sessions, NAAF and the Native Farm Bill Coalition wanted to come together to provide an opportunity for members of tribal communities to participate in open virtual listening sessions. The comments received will then be compiled into that report and then submitted to the White House ahead of their September conference. So we will go into an open discussion. The questions will be provided on screen where I can ask them out loud for those who are joining by phone as well. Once I ask the question, I'll open it up for comments, and comments can be accepted via the question box and in the Zoom function or in the comment section for those of us joining live on social media. So we will read aloud the comments, but if you would like for yours to be private, you can send that via direct message, and we won't read that aloud, but we will include that in the compilation for the report. There is also an anonymous option for your Zoom questions. So if you'd like to have your comments be included, but don't want to have your name attached to that, that is not required. If you could, please, we ask that you include your tribal affiliation with your comment. So with that, I'll do a quick overview here of the pillars from what the White House was submitting for their requests for comments for their conference itself. One being improving access to, improving food access and affordability, integrating nutrition and health, empowering all consumers to make and have access to healthy choices, supporting physical activity for all, and enhancing nutrition and food security research. And we did have a question come in. I'll just go ahead and answer that. This recording will be available on the live stream on NAAF's social media, and you can find us at Native American Agriculture Fund. In addition, there is a section we'll go over later to submit your comments on the Native Farm Bill Coalition's website. But with that, I will go into the first question here so we can open it up, and please submit your comments. First question, how has hunger or diet-related disease impacted you, your family, or your community? And while some of those questions and comments are maybe coming in, if I can maybe turn to someone on the Native Farm Bill Coalition to just give a quick brief overview of some of the work that the coalition is doing.
I can hop on that. So the Native Farm Bill Coalition was started in 2017 ahead of the 2018 Farm Bill. And the Native Farm Bill Coalition brought together the voices of those across Indian country to create a unified voice and help advocate at the Hill and Congress for Indian country food and agriculture. And from that strong united voice, we were able to get 63 different provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill, which is just huge for Indian country. And so with the 2023 Farm Bill on the horizon, we're again bringing tribes, tribal organizations, and non-Native allies together with a unified voice to, again, hopefully be able to get more provisions and more aspects in the Farm Bill specific to Indian country and to support Indian country. So this kind of goes right along with that work. And this is why we wanted to partner with NAAF on holding these listening sessions. And we've also had tribal caucus and consultation this week too, that we've helped be a part of because we believe it's very, very important to what we're doing. And food and nutrition and health are so intertwined with different provisions within the Farm Bill. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for folks. And I also wanted to include, we did put a briefing document together. I think some folks on this call have been able to access it, but just in case you haven't, I am going to copy and paste it in there. But we've been doing a lot of outreach right now across Indian country, going from community to hear the different needs from Indian country itself so that we can go and uplift those this fall and as they get started to just on discussions for the Farm Bill. So like I said, I was going to use that link. Sorry, I had to open it to see it. So I'm going to share that with everyone so you can check that out. And it kind of just includes some different things that we've heard through those roundtables, through that outreach. And we kind of compiled it in this document just so that you guys can have an idea of what we're hearing out there. And of course, we're opening the floor right now to hearing more suggestions. We want to hear from you too. If you have stories that go along with some of the things that are included in that document, we definitely want to hear it so that we can ensure that our voices are heard in the conference coming up this fall, because we haven't had an opportunity like this in 50 years. And I think now is a great time to really capitalize on that.
Thank you so much, Mary Bell. And please submit your comments, questions as related to this topic. One thing I know, obviously, COVID has had a tremendous impact on hunger-related issues. So I don't know if, Tony, you want to jump in to talk a little bit maybe about how COVID has impacted some of our communities?
Yeah, the Native American Agriculture Fund is a philanthropic trust. We are established to provide funding over the course of 20 years, and that annual funding cycle has closed for this year. But we have in the past had over 300 grantees, and those grantees are based in and throughout Indian country. And during COVID, we were hearing from our grantees that they were having issues with access to food, issues with nutrition, overall food security, and insecurity. So we worked with partners to put out a survey, and that hunger survey, it highlighted issues and it brought to the surface issues that we didn't necessarily know would come about. And one of those in particular was that there was an experience, and it's now recorded, and we can use that quantitative data to advocate for additional servicing to Indian country. But in particular, having our own survey, our own data to work from, it's one of the first times that an entity such as ours has been able to do that, and then focus that information into the communities and to the decision makers where it needs to be heard and understood. One of the takeaways that we had that brought to light an issue that the federal government hadn't necessarily tapped into was the fact that when the height of COVID lockdowns were experienced, many that received federal assistance were somewhat taken care of. But we found in Indian country, our participants, those that were just above the poverty line, were impacted the most. And those are the types of issues where we need to bring that to the decision makers, bring it to the administrations, the departments that oversee funding and services that could assist those, not only Native Americans, but any citizen that finds themselves in that gap, the ability to have a resource available to them so that they do not have to experience or go hunger or go without food or make decisions that they otherwise wouldn't make related to the type of food that they would want to provide to their own family. The other highlight that we had from that survey was respondents went to their tribal entities often first. That was the first governing our municipality that they would look to for assistance. And that alone was indicative that our tribal members have confidence in their tribal governments, and those tribal governments have the ability to administer services. And we want to make sure that they are empowered to do so, not only through the federal funding mechanisms, but also in their administration in the departments that exist to serve Indian country, or where Indian country can access servicing. And so in particular, HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, which IHS falls within the Indian Health Service, Department of Interior, which BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, falls in, and the United States Department of Agriculture, which has multiple departments that serve and can assist in disaster and food insecurity, in particular the Food and Nutrition Service. And we also highlighted issues related to what type of assistance that our participants in our survey were seeking out. And we found, and we have known this for quite some time, and the Farm Bill Coalition is working on this, we found that there are communities that have to make decisions on if you're receiving a SNAP card or an EBT card that you can use in a store versus one that you have to where you get a food distribution box. And sometimes neither of those are best suited for the community that is having to make those choices. And that's one of the things that the Farm Bill Coalition is working on, is how can we find a happy medium? Because you could have all the money in the world on a EBT or SNAP card and nowhere to buy healthy food. And especially in Indian country where we are very, very remote, we were impacted greatly by supply chain issues, especially in the food sector. So beyond today, we want to make sure that you are part of the Native Farm Bill Coalition, and every voice matters, including individuals. Go to their website and make sure that you sign up to get on their listserv, all of our listservs of the members that are participating today. But this is very timely. The Farm Bill Coalition is gathering information, and it's similar to this effort where we're trying to provide information to the White House. We want to make sure that Congress and department heads also have this information as we move into the next Farm Bill, which impacts Indian country more than any other funding mechanism throughout the federal government. USDA is more than just a tractor and farming. It is water, wastewater, it is housing, entrepreneurship, disaster assistance, it is broadband, telemedicine. It touches every facet of rural America, and therefore we all need to participate. And today we would like for your information, even if you think it's repetitive or it's already been said in this session, or we've made that statement, if you repeat that statement and add your name to it or your tribal affiliation to it, that adds to the voice and make sure that the White House knows that that is an important issue to us. And you can also do this via email. We need to get this information back to the White House by July 15th. So again, if you're making a statement simply that relates to your community, what is a need that your community has right now, or your own family, or if you want to restate some of the things that we've mentioned, because they too could impact or help your community, please do so. And again, you can add those later on. You can email us. You can also make anonymous recommendations, but we encourage you to, if you can, add your name or tribal affiliation or organization that you work for, because the more voices we can provide, the more servicing and information will be elevated to those decision makers.
And if I could just add really quickly, we are sending this information to the White House by July 15th, but we have an internal deadline of July 8th at midnight Central Time. So please try to get us those before then. It's going to take us a few days to pull everything together. So if it happens to come in late, still send it to us. But we just want to flag July 8th is our internal deadline.
And I will also point out, I believe Kayla included in the chat here, there's on the Native Farm Bill Coalition website, there is a form to submit your comments. So you can go to that. We'll also have our emails, as Tony mentioned at the end of the presentation, so you can email us those comments as well. We did have a comment come in. Thank you so much for contributing to this. And one comment was focused on how food insecurity leads to poor mental health, leading to things like depression, addiction, suicide, and how more funding for improving our response to mental health and community healing programs is necessary, and how it makes sense to really heal as a community. So thank you for providing that. Another comment on how hunger and diet-related disease has impacted the community. Increased weight due to cheap and readily available processed food. So thank you for that as well. I think we're going to move on to our second question. Keep having these questions come in. We really appreciate the feedback here. The second question we have: what specific actions should the U.S. federal government, including the executive branch and Congress, take to achieve each pillar? And I can go back to those pillars here in a moment, but what are some of the opportunities and barriers to achieving those actions? Or actions should include specific policy or programmatic ideas and changes, as well as funding needs. I can briefly go back here to the pillars slide. This again was improving access food access and affordability, all the way through enhancing nutrition and food security and research. So if you have any comments you'd like to submit about those specific actions and how it can impact some of these pillars, please submit those comments there. And again, if you're joining us with live stream, we do have a member of our team monitoring those comments sections, so submit via social media as well. Any other additional comments about food insecurity relating to mental health or poor health with readily available processed foods?
While we're waiting for some comments to come in, perhaps some contextual background of things that the Native Farm Bill Coalition has been advocating for is the expansion of 638 to more programs in USDA. We know that when tribes make the decisions that are best for them, they not only use the money more efficiently, but they can provide better services to their tribal members. And we were very excited to see in the 2018 Farm Bill, the demonstration program for FDIPR, and although not directly related to food, but it could be if you're protecting tribal lands from forest pests and disease, depending on if you're sourcing herbs or medicines, what have it be. 638 for the forestry title. So we'll be continuing to expand or advocate for the full expansion. And we were very excited to see that USDA's Equity Action Plan, which it released recently, also calls for the expansion of 638. So we are pressuring the White House to use its own materials that it put out as it kind of creates its priorities and policies for this strategic plan.
Thank you, Kayla. A couple of things that have come in here as well in response to this question. Increasing funding for 1994 TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, as well as allowing tribal nations to purchase more culturally and regionally relevant foods for the federal nutrition programs instead of for national food commodities. Another one was removing the FDIPR prohibition on dual participation. So I know that actually at NAAF, I believe one of our interns did a research project on that and removing dual participation. So more to come on that. Another comment here was about needing a focus made specifically on native agriculture and indigenous foods. Also better incorporation and support of traditional and tribal food cultivation, as well as support for gathering, harvesting, and hunting rights for Native communities. So we have a couple of those questions coming in. If any of our panelists want to speak to any of those, and then after that, we can move to the third question.
One of the, parts of the Farm Bill Coalition's work in the various parts of the Farm Bill include additional support for our tribal colleges, as well as implementing and calling for parity. So tribes have the authority to administer programs and services that take into account and respect the tribal, traditional, or cultural practices related to food harvesting. I think one thing that we all could use your comments or suggestions on is what type of protocol do you see in these organizations that are gathered today, which support Indian country agriculture, including traditional food and cultural practices? How can we help support you? And one of the distinctions that we find within the Department of Agriculture is the distinction of what is a farmer. And that designation comes down to a monetary amount that you produce via your farm, and it could be a small acre farm. But those various designations don't always include what takes place within Indian country, and our types of farm practices are the types of products that we engage in. So every region's different. We have had success in the past in implementing different traditional foods into the food distribution program, and including bison and wild rice. And we're able to provide waivers for certain foods to be utilized within FDIPR programs that are regionally based. But we could do more, but we need to hear from Indian Country. And thank you for adding that comment, because these types of comments or suggestions are the things that we can take. It's one thing for us to go and advocate as an organization or educate, as we say, but it's another for us to come with names and titles in regions that think that this is important.
Thank you, Tony. And just as a reminder, if you have a thought that comes up related to any of these questions and we've already passed it, if you would need to reference the question later, that link that Kayla shared in the chat box, and we can share it again, which goes to the Native Farm Bill Coalition website, has those questions listed out. Again, it doesn't have to also fit within those questions. So if there are other areas that you'd like to contribute, please feel free to submit those comments. But with that, we'll move into our third question here. What specific actions should local, state, territory, and tribal governments, private companies, nonprofit and community groups, or others take to achieve these pillars? I did also want to comment, some of the questions and comments we received at our last listening session included a need for more focus on sustainability as it's related to food sovereignty, and the depletion of soil quality, as well as depletion of water resources. So focus on regenerating the soil was as a need as well. So that I know natural climate solutions should be a focus as well, if that's related to anything that you'd like to contribute. One thing to answer this question, one comment, thank you, Kelly, for submitting. Advocate for more regionally based procurement that supports localized over federal food systems. Did anyone want to comment or speak to that?
I can make a few comments with regards to the Native Farm Bill Coalition's current priorities around advocating for regionally based procurement. Absolutely, that's a priority for us that we've heard in other outreach that we've been able to do and heard from our tribal leaders. As an example, we work fairly closely with the food distribution program on Indian reservations and the tribal leaders who advocate for their communities when it comes to that program. And they highlight the need for regional procurement specifically because we see things like my traditional foods in Chickasaw country might not be the traditional foods in Alaska. In fact, they probably aren't and shouldn't be based on availability. But regional procurement helps to address the specificity that we see in our communities. So there's more access to your specific regional foods under that umbrella of regional procurement. Additionally, it helps us to not over-source from one particular area, one particular farm, one particular food type, because in making sure that our folks have access to their traditional foods, we don't want to wipe out everybody's access to this traditional food, right? And at a national procurement level, if we were attempting to get, wild rice is included in the food package. So maybe I won't use that as our touchstone. But if there were a particular traditional food that was grown in a very specific area and in a very specific way, if that had to be sourced nationally for all participants in the program, it could very well wipe out that source of that food, meaning nobody outside of the program would have access to it. Regional procurement is another way to address that particular issue. So there is a ton of support for regional procurement formats, for styles in that way in these programs going forward. It is absolutely a Native Farm Bill Coalition priority at present, and we're so excited to hear that we're on the right track with additional support there. And if you could think of other ways that regional procurement will bolster these programs, help our communities, absolutely let us know.
Thank you, Kelly. Another comment we received at our last listening session was about the difficulty that is related to the way federal funding is rolled out. Oftentimes the timeframes for grants can be 30 days from the date's announced, or other challenges are centered around FSA or NRCS and access to these programs and the complexities of participating in them. So I don't know if anyone wants to speak to maybe any of that about federal funding rollouts and how maybe that's a challenge.
Yeah, and I can just add a little bit there. I think you covered it pretty well, but there are other packages, large packages, where other advocates in other kind of areas, and thinking specifically the bipartisan infrastructure law, where there were so many grant opportunities being rolled out that many tribes and other stakeholders, they were unable to track which ones are happening when. And then it was a fast turnaround. And am I actually eligible for this long list that the White House posted on, their build.gov website? So one thing a lot of people have just more broadly across various federal agencies is getting that schedule. When can we anticipate that these grants are going to be rolled out? And what is their general turnaround time? That way it gives tribes the opportunity to more clearly see, am I eligible, and when do I need to start this process? If there's any information that I can put together ahead of time. So just having that basic schedule and not leaving it up to just, okay, we finally were able to push it out, or we finally got our federal funding, is a top priority.
Thank you, Kayla.
I'll add to that. One of the reasons why the Farm Bill is important is it's basically a promise on how much money can go to various programs and services. But that promise does not come to fruition until the rules, regulations, the nuts and bolts are then prepared within the department, the agency, the office where that funding is designated to go. So we have had things in former farm bills. It's a promise. Yeah, there's money that's potentially been set aside for that, but it never happens. And that is one of the reasons why the Native Farm Bill Coalition was created, to track that type of information, to find out what funding didn't get rolled out. And it's always out of sight, out of mind. Once the Farm Bill's passed, if you're not monitoring that and tracking it and making sure that the office that's supposed to administer that program has prepared everything, then years can go by and we lose crucial time to provide impact for the funding that's supposed to create change or offer opportunities. I'll give a couple of examples. There used to be a land consolidation program. It was $1 million that was set aside within a former farm bill, and no one ever tapped into it. No one pushed it. It was a lot of smaller organizations and their single voice, but now we're unified. And when things like that happen, we can come prepared to say this program needs to happen. But the important part and the piece of the puzzle that will bring everything together is that the Native Farm Bill Coalition can work with tribes and individuals and organizations that have special needs and look at how should that program look? What should the language look like? What should the requirements and parameters and eligible entities look like? And draft that information so that the office that's responsible, and our federal government, many of our offices are understaffed right now. We have a huge turnover in retirement across the whole federal sector. So in order to make things happen and speed them up, we need our partners to work together. We need to help the Native Farm Bill Coalition so that they can assist. And one of our partners within the Department of Agriculture is the Office of Tribal Relations. And the Office of Tribal Relations can then help shepherd that information through USDA and monitor it and make sure that what was promised is actually going to occur. And we say that to all of the tribes that come to us, to the eligible entities that we serve. And that is, if you want something, even, and I'll use an example, if you want somebody to write you a letter of recommendation, it's a lot easier for you to draft it for them. And people are very busy than just asking them to write one. And so that's one of the things that we need to do to make sure that these programs, that traditional foods are included. And when we're talking about the procurement issue, the amount of wild rice that you had to basically tell the federal government that you would have readily available at any time would be multiple seasons worth of wild rice. It would take away from the cultural use of that wild rice within those communities. It's impractical and in some cases impossible. Yet we want to have an exception for those types of traditional foods to be utilized within their communities. And so those are the types of exceptions, and what that language will look like is what we can all come together and help draft and comment on. So then we get what we want. And honestly, we had a very successful former farm bill because of the unified voice and because we took it one step further, and just from Indian country often just saying, we're the poor of the poor, the rural of the rural, we have diabetes issues, all these health related issues. Instead of just making those statements, we came back and said, here are the issues, here are the programs and services that we need, here's the amount of money that we need, and here's draft language. And so this is the same method that we can use here with the White House, so that not only is the Native Farm Bill Coalition utilizing their representation and their representatives in Congress to educate them on our needs, we're also educating the White House and the heads of the departments that represent these agencies.
Tony, I wanted to add one more thing to what you were talking about. You made some incredible points about accountability, and these things exist in the Farm Bill, but where does it go past that point? A quick plug for some of the work we get to do as the Native Farm Bill Coalition is something called the Implementation Tracker, which is on our website. You can check that out, and it has all of the provisions that are specific to Indian country that were passed in the 2018 Farm Bill. Like you said, a very successful Farm Bill for Indian country. We're hoping for even more this round. So you can see what was passed, and then also next to what was passed, you can see a list of here are how those are being implemented, here are the hangups, as an accountability opportunity for us, so we can keep track of what things have gone through and what things still need attention to be pushed forward. And that's another way that our stakeholders, where you guys can come in and say, all right, this is where I need to call my elected officials. This is what I need to be drafting things for. This is what I need to be preparing for. So as much as it's an accountability factor for the federal partners, it's a get up and go action item list for us as well.
I totally forgot to tie that all together to the former question. So I'm going to loop back around. And that was to say that because of the process, because there's no guarantee on when those funds will be distributed once it's basically allocated through the federal budgeting process and the Farm Bill allocations, that's why there's not a definitive chart. And some of the programs have annual funding that you can count on, NAAF funding in particular. We are a private entity, but we are looking at April 1st every year. We will launch our grant April 1st. And some of the departments have that within USDA in particular. They have a period where every year they launch certain types of their funding. But we have asked that the Office of Tribal Relations, and they were already working on this when we made the request, that they create a table. I used to work in the Office of Tribal Relations, and at the time, the now chairman of the Lumbee Nation, John Lowry, put together a really great table on opportunities, their timelines, when they exist. A lot of our partners on this call, if you join their listserv, including ours, you will have up-to-date information on opportunities that come about. But one of the things that's unique about NAAF's funding being private is that you can use our funding as a set aside for certain federal funds that require you to provide some type of match. You can also use our funding really creatively. Some of the federal funds don't allow you to buy equipment, our computers, our pay salary. You can do all that with NAAF funding. So look at how you can complement NAAF funding with federal funding. The other thing that I wanted to tie in is that the White House convening that took place, the summit the presidential leadership summit that would take place for tribes during the Obama administration was really crucial, because it required all of the departments to let the federal government know through OMB, the Office of Budget and Management, requested this information from each agency. What have you done for Indian country, and where's the record of it? And there would be a compilation from the White House, a report on what all of those agencies and offices said. And that was an area where sometimes people would be like, I didn't even know that opportunity existed. But if you want to make a comment in this comment section or email us and just make that statement, we want to know when funding comes out. We want to be aware, or we want leniency in during cultural times, different exceptions, any of those things that you want them to know that should happen, exceptions in procurement. Again, put those in the comment section or email them, because that's what we can relay to the White House. And one last thing is the July 8th deadline. You can get any of that information to us. And as stated, it will take a little bit time to put this report together, but another avenue to get this information to the decision makers is to participate in those regional Farm Bill roundtables. And that information will also be echoed and a continuing compilation of what they're hearing in Indian Country will continue to be made available through their reporting.
Thank you, Tony. And I see we've also had a couple of links shared to some of the resources mentioned, one including, which is the Farm Bill implementation tracker that was mentioned, as well as an opportunity to sign up for the Native Farm Bill Coalition's newsletter to learn more about those roundtable discussions. And I wanted to add on something quickly, because we had a question about resources for state recognized tribes. And it was, Tony was talking about NAAF grants to eligible entities, including 501c3 organizations and nonprofit organizations, educational organizations and institutions, community development financial institutions, CDFIs and native CDFIs, as well as tribal governments, both state and federally recognized, and their instrumentalities. So I wanted to address that. One other comment that came in here is on the importance of permanently authorizing the summer EBT and children program and supporting both food package models for WIC and SNAP, and that the WIC model ensures greater nutrition security by providing specific food items high in key nutrients for growth and development of children. So thank you for that comment. Another comment that came in here is funding and supporting local knowledge building of what traditional foods are for their area and geographical regions. We had another comment coming here as well about the importance of what's happening with scarcity for seafood and different shellfish. I'm assuming on maybe a coastal regional area. I'm not sure if you want to add on to more information maybe about regionally where that's located. We'd appreciate that information. But with that, I'm going to move on to question number 4 here, which is, what are opportunities for public and private sector partners to work together to achieve these pillars? So you can submit your comments there.
I'm going to add really quickly participation in the agricultural census, and also Occupton, one of our grantees, is also doing a survey on needs, financial needs in Indian Country, including seafood, because that is funded by their agricultural CDFI. One of the things that the Native Farm Bill Coalition did in the past is make sure that our seafood harvesters and our traditional fishermen and women were able to, if they choose to, fall within the risk management agency's definition as a producer and receive disaster assistance. So learning how to become a qualified insurance or policy holder through RMA is important. And that's something that we'll work on this year. And I know that the Intertribal Agriculture Council and the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative received some funding last year to also help do some education on the risk management agency, because as you are experiencing a loss, you should qualify for that type of assistance. And so those two entities will work together to prepare information on how tribes can use that, including fishermen and women in the seafood sector.
Great, thank you. Yes, we did get clarification that that was in a coastal area, so thank you for that additional comment. We did have a comment here from a tribal FDIPR program director. One of the issues is that they have to turn people away from the program due to the low poverty level guidelines. So with inflation of food costs, housing, and transportation, these guidelines should be looked at. Thank you for that comment.
I agree with that. And it is our hope that with more tribes' authority to administer their own programs, they can also work to administer their own qualifications. When I worked in the Office of Tribal Relations, we had nationally a lot of natural resource settlements that occurred through the Department of Interior. And getting a natural resource settlement through your tribe in a one-time, it wasn't even considered a per capita. It was a distribution of a legal action. But those settlements bumped a lot of people out of receiving these programs and services. And one in particular was in the middle of winter. It was the last food distribution box that would be received before Christmas. So very important. And yet these people were getting bumped out. If a tribe had the autonomy and the authority to create their own designations of who qualifies and who doesn't, then you wouldn't experience that issue as much. But those are the types of things that we need to hear from you. And how would you administer that program, or why do you think a tribe should administer that program? And that's what we can take to advocate on your behalf.
Thank you, Tony. I do want to give a shout out here. Thank you, Maribel, for sharing this link to information about the agriculture census. I'm sure plenty of the panelists here can speak to the importance of that data. So I don't know if anyone actually does want to speak to it, but I can actually move on to the fifth question as well. I know just even for some of our NAAF purposes, we utilize some of that data and that comes from the ag census. So I believe the deadline, correct me if I'm wrong, to receive in the mail is tomorrow, the 30th, correct? So please follow that link. If you have never received the ag census, you can sign up there using that link. Our fifth question here. So what are innovative, successful activities that are already happening at the local, state, territory, and tribal levels that could inform actions at the federal level? We can have questions, comments as they come in. We'll monitor for those. In addition, just kind of circling back to the census information, the Census of Agriculture is a complete count of the U.S. farms and ranches and the people who operate them. So even small plots of land, whether rural or urban, growing fruit, vegetables, or some food or some other food, animals account if 1,000 or more of such products were raised and sold or normally would have been sold during the census year. So the Census of Agriculture, taken only once every 5 years, looks at the land use and ownership, operator characteristics, production practices, income and expenditures. And for America's farmers and ranchers, the Census of Agriculture is their voice and an opportunity to contribute to that. I believe IFAI also has a breakdown of how that ag census data is broken up for even native producers specific to Indian country. We can try to see if we can find that link to share out as well. Again, here, this question: what are innovative or successful activities that are already happening at the local, states, territory, tribal levels that could inform actions at the federal level? We are coming. Go ahead.
Comments in on that. Another quick plug for the ag census, as I'm sure I know it's no surprise to our panelists. I'm sure it's not a surprise to our stakeholders who've joined us on the call that Indian country is continually undercounted in any type of data collection. And this information from the ag census is so essential to how policy is crafted, specifically policy that impacts Indian country. So where we're not counted, we may see differences and challenges in our community and the impacts of policy every day, but that may not be a way that federal officials and partners can understand and process that information. So having it in a data set like the ag census makes policy implementation, tracking, and creation a lot more effective for our communities. So if you're a producer, if you know a producer in Indian country, send them the link, have everybody that you possibly can sign up for the census. It makes a huge difference for us.
Don't forget to also flag your tribe if your tribe has an agricultural department, and let them know to participate as well.
Great, thank you all. I'm going to move. I believe we have one more question I think that we wanted to include that's more specific to Indian country. So I wanted to make sure we have time here at the end to also provide an opportunity to submit comment, which is how can the Indian Health Service and the U.S. Department of Health and Nutrition Services support hunger, nutrition, and health in Indian country? So I know those are more specific to those departments, but if you have any comments or questions on those, please submit them, and we will monitor those as they come in. Any other closing comments or remarks, as we are waiting for the additional comments as they come in?
I can jump in here really quick with one thing that I heard on the USDA and HHS consultation yesterday was, continuing to allow the flexibilities with telemedicine that we received during the COVID pandemic, because it really enhanced Indian country's ability to access critical health care, but also expanding it to include, diabetes related education or other kind of services that we may need access to, but depending on where you live or your inability to get to a local facility may be difficult.
Thank you for that. I think of that contribution. I also want to remind everyone, I believe we have, I'll go here to the next one as well, which again, you can submit your comments via the Native Farm Bill Coalition website. But I also wanted to display our contact information here. This is for the Farm Bill Coalition as well as for NAAF. You can submit your comments via email, as Tony had mentioned earlier. Those questions, the prompted questions, or if you have other additional ideas, you can find those questions on the Farm Bill Coalition website. But I will open it up here in the last couple of minutes. Any other closing thoughts? Okay. So we really appreciate everyone who joined us today and to those who made comments. As I mentioned, we will be compiling this for a report. So we appreciate your participation and for your feedback. But with that, I think we will say have a great day and close out our session today. Thank you so much.